I didn't know they had this TV studio up there. It's pretty neat.
Okay, we're rolling.
All right.
Okay.
This is an interview at Lyons Hall, Canisius College, Buffalo, New York. It is the 7th of May, 2008, approximately 4 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, place of birth, please?
Sure. Michael James Mettille, November 8th, 1975. I was born in Joliet, Illinois.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to going into the service?
Well, I had an associate's degree. It's kind of I kind of got into the service in a roundabout way. I'd always been arguing with my mother about joining, and she wanted me to go slow, and I wanted to enlist right away in the active duty. So she kind of won out. We compromised, and I started off in the Air Force ROTC in Chicago, and I was doing that when I was going to school at a junior college in Chicago and working part-time. And from there, I went to a military junior college in New Mexico called New Mexico Military Institute, and I went to the Army ROTC. And there were a lot of members, a lot of people at that school that were members of the New Mexico National Guard, Army National Guard. So that's where I started learning about the National Guard, the reserves, and the differences between the branches and things like that. And when I finished there, I came to Canisius College, and I decided to join the National Guard. I talked my mom into, that the National Guard really was a good deal. They were offering good financial benefits, and it was an in-between way, and I could get my feet wet in that, and then, decide if I want to go active duty after that. And I'd always wanted to fly also, so this was also a chance to kind of build my resume towards that, towards getting a flying job. And I came to Buffalo, signed up, and tried to sign up with the Air National Guard at that time, and they told me that they weren't really sure, they needed people. I mean, they always do a really good job.
No, this was at the Niagara Falls?
This is the Niagara Falls, yeah, this is with the 107th Air Command Wing, and they were like, and the recruiters there weren't sure that there would be a place for me, and they weren't sure there was any money left over for kickers and things like extra money for school and things like that. So I talked to the Army Guard, and the Army Guard said, yeah, I mean, they couldn't wait to get me. They had all kinds of extra money to give me. They were throwing money at people, and it was a lot closer. At the time, I didn't have a car, so it was at the Connecticut Street Armory. From Canisius to the Connecticut Street Armory. It's a lot easier than getting to Niagara Falls. So I decided to stay to go with the Army, and I always kind of had a desire to run around in the woods and shoot a gun, throw grenades, and things like that. And the Army definitely gave me a chance to do that. And I signed up with the Combat Engineers and went to Combat Engineer School at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Lost in the Woods, as we fondly refer to it as. And did 3 years as a combat engineer out of the Connecticut Street Armory with the 827th, and just had a good experience there. And the checks were always on time, and it was a pretty good deal. And as I was coming to the end of my time in college, and I was a senior, I was trying to figure out what my next move was going to be, and I still wanted to fly in the military. And I didn't realize that you could fly in the National Guard coming right off the street. I thought you'd have to go to the active duty first. So it was kind of funny what happened. I was dating a girl from Paris at the time, and she was an exchange student. So around Christmas time, we went to the airport to buy our ticket home. And the lady working at the counter had a pair of these miniature pilot wings, Air Force pilot wings, and I recognized them because my uncle was an Air Force pilot. And so we struck up a conversation, started talking. I told her how I wanted to be a pilot, and I was going to apply to all 4 services, and whichever one was going to give me a chance to fly was the one I was going to go with. And she said, well, before you do that, you should really talk to my husband, because he's the squadron commander in Niagara Falls, and he's hiring pilots right now. So I did. And I interviewed with them, and they hired me to be a pilot. And so I transferred in 2000. I transferred over to the Air National Guard from the Army National Guard. And I had to wait a couple of years because there's a lot of paperwork for pilots and things like that, for going into pilot training and things like that. So
Now, what rank were you when you were in the National Guard, in the Army Guard?
In the Army Guard, I started off as an E4 because I had an associate's degree coming out of New Mexico Military Institute. So anyone with 2 years of college started off as an E4 automatic in basic training. And then when I left the Guard, I was still an E4 because they give you the E4 right away, but it takes a long time to run that E5.
Right.
Doing it that way. So I was still in E4 when I transferred into the Air Guard, and then the Air Guard had to promote me to E5 when they sent me to AMS, which is the Academy of Military Science. It's a 6-week commissioning school at McGee-Tyson Air National Guard Base in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the reason why it's 6 weeks is about 90% of the people going through that school are prior enlisted. So everyone pretty much already knows how to march, they know how to salute, they know how to wear the uniform. You got and a few people just come right off the street, mostly for pilot slots. People that want to be pilots, so they're usually highly motivated to get through the program. The standard program is 12 weeks, and that's OCS, and that's down in Georgia, so it's usually about 12 weeks to get commissioned. But they had to promote me to E5. Everyone's in E5 when they go through AMS or OCS or any other kind of commissioning source, so that's the pay grade. And let's see, I came out of there and I started to, and I did some flying, actually at Buffalo International Airport. I did, flew in a little like Cherokee Warrior. I had to earn my private pilot's license before I could go on to pilot training, and then went to pilot training. And as I said before, about 2/3 of the way through pilot training, they decided I'd make a better navigator. And so on the way home, I called my squadron commander, and he asked me if I wanted to be a navigator. And I said yes, and so they transferred me over to the reserve. And I had a quick interview with the operator commander in the reserve side, and they needed C-130 navigators desperately. They still do, but they definitely needed them then, and they hired me right on and sent me down to school pretty quickly, within about 6 months, if I remember correctly.
Now, how long was the navigator school?
Navigator school is 10 months. Pilot training is 12.
Mm-hmm.
So navigator school is just a little bit shorter than pilot training.
Where did you go for that?
And that was in San Antonio, Randolph Air Force Base. It used to be called the West Point of the West because that's where all the that's where they used to do a lot of their pilot training. And people went in there. Back in the old days, they had this cadet program where people went in as enlisted, and then when you earned your pilot's wings, you also earned your butter bars. You became a lieutenant. And that was back in World War II. And it's a gorgeous base. And that was about 10 months there, and I came out of there, came back home for a little bit. Then they sent me down to Dobbins Air Reserve Base, just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And that's where I did my C-130 training. And then I came back to Niagara, and also had to do a survival school at, it's in Washington State. The name is escaping me at the moment, but it's in Washington State, right on the Idaho border, in the mountains there. And it's just about a week out in the woods and running around, you know, surviving on 1 meal a day and trying to evade capture and things like that. So it's called SERE. It's Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Evasion Training. Yeah. And I was there for about a week, came back and trained with them for a year before we were activated, and then we went over to Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which was my first overseas duty station. And it's actually a pretty fun trip to go over there too. I should talk about that a little bit because we had to stop at St. John's in Canada, Newfoundland, St. John, Newfoundland, which is just gorgeous. It's surrounded by icebergs, and you get to see that stuff, and it's a gorgeous little town, great little restaurants. And then we fly over to Prestwick, Scotland, stay there a night, and then on to sometimes Suda Bay Crete, where there's a naval base.
Now, were you working as the navigator on the aircraft?
I did. Yeah, I think because I was a lieutenant and I was low on the totem pole, I got to navigate across the oceans both ways when I go. You know, I think it's a lot of guys like St. John's, and you go to places like that, and it's you realize it's your last couple of nights of freedom, because technically it's your last couple of nights to eat and drink whatever you want, and so low man on the totem pole usually get to fly over and do the flying over, because you have to get up early the next day and do all the planning and then go over. And then let's see, Suda Bay Crete, which is a lot of fun, and then into the box, as we say, and flying over Iraq and then down to the Persian Gulf into Al-Udeid Air Base. And Al-Udeid Air Base is an interesting little place. It's in the country of Qatar, small, tiny little country. It's like Saudi Arabia is like the hand, And Qatar is this little, like the thumb, this little peninsula that sticks out of Saudi Arabia into the Persian Gulf. And about 95% of the population lives in Doha, which is the capital city. And of that 95%, about half of those people are foreigners. And they have a lot of Europeans, a lot of Westerners that do like a lot of the financial work in the banks, do a lot of financial transactions and things like that, because they're trying to modernize their economy and prepare for when the gas and the oil runs out. So they make the place very Western friendly. It's a pretty good deal. For instance, there was a PGA tour. They have a golf course there, and there's a PGA. They do a PGA tournament, and here the tickets would cost $65, $70, upwards from that. There they give you the tickets at the door when you walk in. And the same thing with the Formula One race car, and they do sponsor an international rugby tournament. And all these things would cost money if you were to do it in the States or Europe or Australia, but there it's free, which is a nice deal. But it's also a Middle Eastern country, and I remember the first night or the second day there, we went off base, and someone that had been there for a while.
Now, did you have to wear civilian clothes or military?
Right, civilian clothes. We wore civilian clothes when we went off base. And we ended up going to a souk, which is like, it's these really old markets that have been around forever, hundreds of years. And it dawns on you that you're in a foreign country, in another place, when at sunset, the call to prayers start going out. And there's about 10 of you, American military, Westerners, in this Arab country, and you hear, you're surrounded by these speakers where the call to prayers are going out. So that was definitely an interesting experience. Kind of reminded me of the Indiana Jones movies, where he's in these foreign countries, and you hear it's very exotic, where you hear the call to prayers and things like that, and you really realize that you're somewhere different, somewhere it's not quite like home. On the other hand, while they have this really old, ancient culture, they also had about 15 skyscrapers that were going up. Not ones that had been built, but were being built, in the process of being built while I was there. So their economy is modernizing at an extremely fast clip. And I spent 4 months there, and I flew into Iraq mostly, but I also flew into Saudi Arabia. From there, I flew into Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates.
Now, what were your missions?
Well, most missions are flying troops, but sometimes you fly equipment. And I'm not sure how much I can talk about now, just because missions are still going on.
Right.
So, but you fly in vehicles, and I think I put in the questionnaire, one of the most striking things about flying the folks in is when you're the navigator, you're responsible for sitting in the front of the airplane and watching people come on and off. You're the safety, quote unquote, safety observer. The propellers are usually running, so you have to have someone watching as you're loading unloading and offloading people. And looking at the youth of the Army folks that are coming on the plane, men, women, whatever, and it's pretty impressive to see how dedicated American youth are, and dedicated to their country. I mean, joining the military and going to some foreign country and doing that job takes a lot of discipline, a lot of motivation, and you're going to mature very quickly. So it was impressive to see how people handle themselves, and even day to day on the base, watching people behave in a professional manner and really just conducting themselves well under those conditions.
Now, did you fly all branches of service,
Yep.
Marines and
Navy,
Army?
Marine,
Okay.
everyone. So we would also fly, for instance, we flew a humanitarian mission into Pakistan. I don't know if you remember this, but Pakistan had like a 7.2 earthquake. And at the tail end of that, we flew in Navy Seabees, which are engineers, and they're helping to rebuild. And they had medical personnel that were going to the villages, helping people there, and we flew in food and things like that, and first aid kit. And it was nice because the first thing we did when we opened the door, the person waiting there was a Pakistani fighter pilot who was doing, for some reason, he was on doing a ground tour, and he had a Kit Kat bar for me when I got off the plane to thank us for, bringing in people to help them. So that was interesting. They had, on the airport there, they had Pakistani Special Forces guys that were protecting the Westerners, and so it's just an interesting. Pakistan is a very interesting place. We see it in the news today. It's there's a lot of turmoil within that country. A lot of people that are at odds with each other within that country. Let's see. Anything else that really stands out? And
Did you ever find yourself under threat of immediate danger, or rocket or mortar attacks or anything like that?
Yeah, that was the second time around. I went home for a month at the end of my tour there, and actually also I forgot to mention this, but we came in the day before Thanksgiving, so we spent Thanksgiving. I was there for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I think I was home for Easter. But I was there for Thanksgiving and Christmas, so that was interesting too. That was a little different experience to see how folks kind of make their own family when they're over there and do that. But I should also mention that Al-Udeid Air Base is the place. It's a great place for the Air Force guys, especially the Guard and Reserve guys, to get stationed there, because that's where they send the Army and Marine guys for R&R. So, and we're living there. That's like where we live. And people still complain, but we're in the Air Force. So that's what we do. But we have cable TV in the rooms. We had internet access. We had telephones. I mean, it was a pretty good deal. And you could have 3 beers a day. There was a movie theater that was always playing movies.
Was it real beer or the 2.0?
No, it was real beer.
Yeah.
They had the real beer, but you're only allowed 3 a day. You had to have a card and get it punched. I've heard they've done away with that rule. However, we were allowed to wear civilian clothes when we were off duty. Now they're making people wear their physical training all the time, so they have to be in some kind of uniform, no matter what. And there's a nice sized BX there too, and there's a library and pool tables, video games, just all kinds of stuff. There's more stuff than you could ever stay busy with there. Let's see. And then, we came back home for a month. Oh, and one other thing is my squadron there was a composite squadron of Guard and Reserve. So we had 3 Guard units and 3 Reserve units. And fortunately for me, the squadron commander at the time was my squadron commander from back home. So and my first sergeant was the same person there. So it was our guys. We knew they were going to take care of us and look after us and make sure that we didn't get into too much trouble. And the squadron commander, especially from a reserve point of view, a squadron commander and a first sergeant are kind of there to be like a shield and shield you from the active duty and shield you and deflect as much as possible. So your time there is, everyone's professional, and everyone does their job in a professional manner and shows up on time and everything like that. But there's still some cultural differences between the Guard and Reserve and the active duty, even though we're serving together more and more and more. There's still some differences. So it was nice to have those guys there looking out for us. Came home for a month. Then I went to Balad Air Base in Iraq. And Balad Air Base is commonly referred to as Mortaritaville. And that's because they get mortared every day. But fortunately for us, the enemy actually has really bad aim, and most of those mortars land on the perimeter or outside the base, and usually people don't get hurt. I would say my second week there, we were just starting to get settled in. I heard a mortar round go overhead, and it landed a few hundred yards. It actually landed in a shower while people were showering, and I don't think anyone got hurt. But it was quite an experience to hear a mortar go overhead and land somewhere nearby, and be able to see the after effects of that. And then at the tail end, right before I left, there was a mortar attack that actually hit someplace where there were people. And a couple days after that, I was sitting down having lunch with a guy who was a civilian contractor who worked in this location where the mortar landed, and he was back at work the next day. He was prior military, but he was back at work the next day. He had some scratches, a little banged up, but no worse for the wear, all things considered.
How did you feel about civilian contractors, with them earning a lot more money than you were over there?
They deserve every penny of it. As far as I'm concerned, they're not trying to earn a retirement.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them have put in 20, 30 years in the military and are coming back. And I have no problem with those guys. They can get it, good for them. And, I guess in theory it's good for the country because in theory it's supposed to be cheaper in the long run to have civilian contractors. So I'm not sure how that all actually plays out in reality, but hey, good for them. It's also interesting to see the variety of contractors because you also have people that are interpreters, folks that are Iraqi that moved to the United States after '91 and then wanted to come back and help rebuild Iraq, so they've come back, and to sit down and talk to them and hear their stories and just see what they're all about was an interesting experience. Also, another thing in Balad is when we went in there, this is where we joined with a active duty unit. So we had a squadron commander that was active duty. But the second squadron commander that we had come through, his father was is the pilot for Mr. Rich, Bob Rich. So he's actually from Lewiston and went to high school in Lockport and things like that. So although he was active duty, he was still a local boy in a lot of ways. And the director of operations, the guy who runs the day-to-day operations, was a reserve guy, and he was from Niagara Falls. So that was an interesting experience. I saw some guys that I'd gone through training with and flew with them. We were back in the same squadron. They had gone active duty, I'd gone reserve, but we came back together on this one squadron to fly out of Iraq. And I think I may have, and I actually flew with the active duty a couple times. If they had a navigator go down they got sick or something like that. Balad had been an Iraqi Air Force base, and they flew MiGs out of there, but it was a really nice Air Force base. They had a movie theater that, it was dated, maybe, in 1985, if you had seen a movie theater here like that, it would have been the best movie theater around. It had marble staircase, leather furniture. It was really nice. It was a nice movie theater. And they got that up and running. We had an indoor swimming pool. We had an outdoor Olympic swimming pool. And all these things were left by the Iraqis. And that was an interesting base because we actually had an Air Force base kind of right in the middle of this huge Army base. And so we had our own little base within a base.
Did you ever wander off base? Were you allowed to go off base?
Never. No, aircrew are not allowed off base in Iraq. So I guess that's kind of good, but I would have liked to have gotten off base just a little bit. But that wasn't gonna
Now,
happen.
on base, did you have to wear flak jackets or anything?
When we had gotten there, they decided they'd done away with that, and it was just on certain days, if the threat level was high or if they wanted us to wear it, we would wear it. But most of the time we didn't wear it. We had to bring it with us to the airplane, and you're supposed to put it on if you're outdoors and there's a mortar attack at that time. But otherwise, we didn't have to wear it then. And I think just as I was leaving, they were starting to phase it back in again. They'd gotten a new wing commander who wanted people to wear it.
Where did you live? What were your living conditions like?
We started off in a tent, and I was actually there with 3 crews. I volunteered to stay on for a couple more crews. We had a guy who was going through a custody battle, and he was going to come out and replace me, and I decided to stay out there and keep flying because single guy wasn't any skin off my nose to stay out there. See, I lost my train of thought.
Where you
Did
live?
ask me? Oh, where we live. Yeah, we lived in a tent with the first crew. And then in the second 2 crews, we had moved into basically a trailer. It was a trailer that had been divided into 3 separate rooms. And the pilots usually bunked together, the 2 pilots. I bunked with the flight engineer, and then the 2 load masters would bunk together in that same trailer. So the crew would all live together in either in the same tent we all lived together, And then when we moved out of the tent, we were all in that same little box. And the box had air conditioning and brand new bunk beds, and everything was brand new in there. So it was nice.
What about sand? Any problems with the sand?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially in the summertime, going out anywhere between, what was it, between 2 and 6 or 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, it was like walking into a blow dryer. You know, the blow, it was just really hot, dry heat, which was better than humid, but it was an interesting experience. You didn't want to be out for more than a few minutes if you had a...
Now, we interviewed some of the 42nd Division when they were over there, and they talked about how the sand just got into everywhere and everything. Did you have problems with...
Yeah.
They said basically every part of your body you got sand.
Yeah, just walking around. It's
And it
really powdery.
sifted into buildings,
Sure.
even through closed windows.
Yeah,
Did it have
there's
any-
sand everywhere.
Did it have any effect on your aircraft at all? Or
I think
equipment?
I think, yeah, the aircraft, I guess, run better over there just because they're getting run every day. But when they bring them back and take them apart, take them to depot where they take them apart and put them back together again, they're beat up pretty good. And it's because of the heat and the sand. There's just sand everywhere. It just gets in every nook and cranny, every crevice. And that would be more like a crew chief would be able to answer that question better than I would, the guys that work on the planes. But I heard them complaining that it was getting everywhere and getting into everything. So it's constantly something to work with and something they had to work with and constantly battle. So, and they had to work out on that tarmac, in that heat all the time. Being an air crew, you can just go from one air-conditioned environment to the other, and it's great. But the crew chief, they're out there working on the planes under 20-degree weather in the middle of the day. That's because the airplane has to be fixed. It's got to be ready to go on another mission sometime. So it's just it's definitely different.
what about spiders or snakes? Any encounters with them at all?
I had heard about camel spiders, but I didn't really see anything. I didn't really have any experience with that, or scorpions or anything. So
One of the
I can't
women
speak
that
to
we interviewed said they called the rats their crats because they were cat-sized. Did you ever have problems?
I don't remember. I don't
Okay,
recall seeing any rats.
they were out in some of the former palaces.
Huh. That may have been in Baghdad or in the urban areas, but
Yeah, they were out in fire bases.
really.
Okay, what is the mission of your unit in Niagara Falls when you're not in Iraq? Like when the Schenectady makes the runs to Antarctica, do you have missions like that, or?
No, Schenectady is a ski bird.
Yes,
unit.
right.
We're a straight slick unit.
Okay, well, do you have any missions during the year like they have the Antarctic mission they have to do?
We don't
Mission
have
somewhere else in this?
we don't have a dedicated mission like that,
okay.
but we do a lot of the parachute training. So we go down to North Carolina and we'll drop a lot of troops out the bat. We'll go to Fort Benning, and there's been a lot of hundreds of Army guys that have had their first jump out of an airplane I'm navigating. We also go to the Halo School out in Arizona, high altitude, low opening, and that's all Special Forces guys, and that's going up to 10,000 feet, 13,000 feet, 6 times in a day, unpressurized, and but those guys are awesome to work with. They're the most motivated people in the military, and they're just always ready to go and do something, and it's fun. It's challenging, but it's fun. We also can get tagged to do presidential support when the president goes somewhere. We may, we'll spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., flying out of, what's the name of the airport down there in Maryland, when the president flies out of? Andrews Air Force Base. Andrews Air Force Base. We'll pick up the crew from Marine Corps 1, and the Marines travel, they have bomb-sniffing dogs that they travel with, and all their mechanics and all that other stuff, and all their equipment they have to use to work on the airplanes, and fly those guys around and to wherever the president's going. Let's see. We also flew, when we got back home, we flew a lot of folks that were coming back home, and they were going back to their bases from, was it Walter Reed? Or hospital in D.C. I think it's Walter.
Walter Reed.
Walter Reed, yeah.
Washington.
And we flew those guys from out of there back to their Army bases. And some of the guys, they're in pretty good shape. They could have flown commercially, but every once in a while there was a guy that he had to come on, and he was on a bed with IVs and, you know, I mean, just really banged up. And there was just no other way for him to get home except from the back of a C-130. And I think that's what we were really there for, were those guys that need to get somewhere. We did that. We flew the Marine Corps band out to San Antonio, Texas, and they opened up the Intrepid, which is a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center. And they it's connected with the Fisher House. And the Fisher House is a family in New York City, very wealthy family, very supportive of the military, and they open up houses next to military hospitals for the families of soldiers to stay in. And they also were big supporters of the Intrepid. They were the primary promoters of it and the ones that pulled in the money for it. And it was built without any government funding at all. So the first day, I didn't really have an idea of what we were doing there or going down there for. You know, I had some vague idea, some vague notion of what was going on, but it was we went to downtown San Antonio, and they had the Marine Corps band was playing there. But also there were a lot of celebrities there. Michelle Pfeiffer was there. Let's see, who else was there? John Mellencamp was there. There were a lot of celebrities there that had been involved with raising money for this thing, and there were also a lot of the soldiers that were going to be going through there and going through the rehabilitation, which was probably, in that questionnaire I asked what was the most memorable thing in my military service. It's got to be those guys, because it's the only time I've ever gotten choked up being in the military. And there was a guy there who, I think he had 30-degree burns, looked like over 90% of his body, maybe less, because he had clothes on. But he was sitting there with his baby daughter on his knee. And there were a lot of guys like that at this place that were going to be going through the Intrepid for rehabilitation. And just to see the sacrifice that these guys had made, and to also see that there were people that were using their celebrity or people that were using their wealth to show their appreciation to these guys and try to help them out in some way. That was very memorable. And there's also some guys there who had lost a leg, but were looking forward to getting a prosthetic and hopefully being able to still deploy. They're still looking forward to an opportunity going back overseas. So that was also very, very memorable, very striking. What else do we do? Aeromed training is a big thing that we do. We have an Aeromed unit on the base in Niagara Falls, and those are the folks that basically, nurses that fly in the back of the airplane, transporting people. So even just going out and doing a training mission without any patients in the back, we do a lot of that. And then just beans and bullets, just transporting food, supplies, a lot of things like that. So.
How long do you think you're going to stay in?
Well, I'd like to stay in at least another 10 years. I have over 10 in now, and
So you want to get 20?
I'd like to get in 20 at least, and I'll stay in as long as they let me. So.
Do you have any regrets leaving the pilot program and going to Navigator?
Well, I had regrets at the time because I just always wanted to be a pilot, and that didn't happen. But now, having gone to the Navigator side of it, I'm very happy with being a Navigator. And if I had stayed as a pilot, I would have been flying tankers. And I'd much rather be a Navigator on a C-130 than a pilot on a tanker, to be honest with you. So it's been, I've gotten to see a lot more of the world on a C-130. I've gone as far east as Pakistan, and as far north as Iceland, as far south as St. Croix, St. Thomas. I've been to Cuba, Haiti, been as far west as Hawaii, and all points in between.
Mhm.
So,
So how does your mother feel about this whole thing?
well, she's been very grateful for the military helping me get through college, and it's continuing to help me get through college. I'm back in school. I'm in law school at UB now, and so I'm still getting the GI Bill,
Mhm.
helping to pay for law school. I had the GI Bill when I went to Canisius, GI Bill for law school, and I'm still working part-time in the reserve, still flying a couple times a month, and still doing my 1 weekend a month. So it's best part-time job you can have when going through law school, I think. So she's grateful for all those things, but she's definitely, always a little nervous when I go overseas.
Mhm.
Now, what rank are you now?
I'm a captain. So, been a captain for a while, and we'll see if I make major. So, I've got to do my squadron officer school this summer and go from there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.